everyone, a very warm welcome to another edition of World Panorama. Like always, get ready to catch up on the biggest international news of the week. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you those detailed reports, a look at the top stories. Renewed hope for Syria's future. Government and opposition agree to meet face-to-face. Will talks lead to an agreement on political transition? Corporates and politicians from world over gather in Davos for the World Economic Forum. Income inequality, one of the key focus areas. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visits India for security and economic cooperation. World Panorama takes a look at the finer details. And confident that Brazil will be ready in time for the FIFA World Cup event, President Dilma Rousseff opened 7th of the 12 soccer stadiums planned for use. Our top story, the Geneva II talks on peace and stability in Syria. Now, Syria's opposition and government have agreed to meet in the same room in Geneva after the first day of a peace conference that ended with no direct talks. UN envoy Lakhdar Brahimi said they knew the talks were to save Syria. Delegates are aiming at small concessions, not a full peace deal here. Diplomatic sources say the hope is they will focus on getting humanitarian aid into besieged areas of the city of Homs, something the US, Russia and UN have reportedly been focusing on. Now, at first, the United Nations failed to convince regime and opposition delegates to sit in the same room. The opposition said it would not meet Assad's delegation unless it first agreed to sign up to a protocol calling for a transitional administration. The government rejected the demand outright and said its negotiators would return home unless serious talks began within a day. Friday was meant to be the first time in 3 years of war that Assad's government and foes would negotiate face-to-face. There is hope now that talks could pave way for discussion of wider issues like political transition. So what happens now? With the outlook still a bit dim, is there going to be something that can end this deadlock? It's taken far too long. Can Syrians wait more? We'll be talking about this with Dr. A.K. Pasha. He's professor at the Center for West Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thanks for joining me on the show, sir. But before we get to talking, here's a report for our viewers on the recent developments.
There was hope and the excitement of moving towards a solution after months of hectic negotiations. Syria's warring sides met briefly in the same room on Saturday for the first time since peace talks started in Geneva.
نحن منفتحين على كل نقاش ضمن توجهات السياسة السورية.
With neither side appearing ready for serious concessions, mediators focused on short-term deals to keep the process moving forward. There were no talks of an interim government.
It's too early to discuss this matter. Everything in Geneva 1 is about substantive issues, and we have to discuss the whole package. No selectivity. Plus, of course, we may have some reservations with regard this point or that point, but we will discuss everything on time. Today we will not get into the substance. Today is about formalities.
The peace conference almost collapsed on Friday, the day face-to-face talks were meant to start, and was only saved after UN mediator Brahimi persuaded the two sides to focus on smaller issues on which agreement might emerge.
We came with a positive spirit, an open mind, to discuss everything with the other delegation. This is why we are here.
Brahimi has indicated that his aim is to start by seeking practical steps like local ceasefires, prisoner releases and access for international aid deliveries before embarking on the tougher political negotiations. Syria's civil war has already killed at least 130,000 people, driven up to a third of the country's 22 million people from their homes.
All right, Dr. Pasha, now certainly there has been some sort of reconciliation. We can say that they've bent under intense pressure from countries over here, the United Nations, the Russia and the US. At least both the parties have agreed to meet face-to-face.
Yes, I principally hold Russia and America as the architects, although it is being held under the UN auspices, and Ban Ki-moon and Lakhdar Brahimi have been playing positive roles. But without the pressure from the two major powers, this could not have been convened at this juncture, given the problems associated with representation of the Syrian opposition. Just 2 days before the conference, they had not decided which faction or which leader would represent. So the convening of the conference itself is a big success. Number two, although both the parties are holding to their hardline positions that that is the Syrians who are asking for end to terrorism or violence perpetrated by the opposition, and the opposition is calling for the transitional government with full executive powers, that is an end to the presence of Bashar al-Assad. I don't think there will be unanimity on these 2 points, but Lakhtar Ibrahimi sounds cautiously optimistic in the press conference which he gave last night. And also he was, I think, indirectly supported by John Kerry, the US Secretary of State, who held Bashar al-Assad as the principal architect of the carnage, destruction, which he said he has wrought about in this conflict.
So one thing is amply clear over here, that there are major differences between both the sides. As you pointed out, what are these differences? They're very clear right now. So there has to be some common ground under which both these parties have agreed finally to meet face to face. There will have to be some concessions given here by both the sides, and Lakhtar Ibrahimi seems to be the person in charge of bringing these parties together in the same room. So what do you think? Which side is going to concede how much? That's also going to be very important to see here.
I don't see any concession on these core issues which I mentioned, that is terrorism and political transition arrangement, but on the humanitarian issue, both seem to be flexible. That is, half of Syria's population is now either displaced or living as refugees, and they desperately need food, medicine, and winter clothing. So there is an understanding between these two parties that the humanitarian tragedy needs to be averted. Otherwise, there will be mass deaths in the camps which are exposed to extreme winter. Number one. Number two, the medicine which is available in the border states of Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, Iraq is not being sent to the areas where it is needed. WHO and various international organizations are desperately looking for a ceasefire so that trucks could move these badly needed medicine and first aid equipment. So in that way, the ceasefire, localized ceasefire is being sought, and both seem to be receptive, because without this ceasefire and at least lull during limited period, these convoys of medicine which are needed by the hospitals, where hundreds and thousands of injured people are in desperate need of medicine and critical material, is to be sent there.
So one thing is clear, that something that we can expect to come out of this meeting is the ambiguities have to be cleared, whatever they exist as of now. And secondly, what you're saying is focus will be on so much not on the political transition or the contentious issues, but something like humanitarian aid. So that will be certainly a positive in the sense that the talks can move ahead from here on, and this will be read as a huge success in this peace initiative.
But the other point which would be touched is the political aspect also, because in another 4 to 5 months there will be elections, presidential elections in Syria, and both the major powers are of the opinion that there must be a transitional government which would include the opposition. Because they have not been able to militarily dislodge the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad, and neither Bashar has been able to completely crush the opposition. So there is stalemate. It is sort of 50-50. So the Russians and the Americans have realized that both should be on board for a political settlement, and the elections which are due in summer probably will bring to the fore an opposition elected member of government who would be more acceptable to the Syrian Baath party, whose rule was seen as only embedded in the constitution, but now it has been amended to include other opposition elements also, including the Syrian Coordination Committee, which will field its own presidential candidate.
So with the elections taking place, there are chances now, increasing chances that the opposition will play a key role in the elections. But what happens to the fate of Bashar al-Assad in this interim?
Well, as I said, half of the people are outside his control virtually. So the ones who are under his control are increasingly now under pressure for various reasons. They have lost jobs, the infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So they are asking the big question, is it in our interest to have this leader, whether he will be able to deliver, because he has not been able to provide security to half of the population. So people will ask questions, and neither, of course, the opposition is united or a more acceptable candidate. So you have this stalemate continuing, and Syria will be in for stability even after the elections. There will be no clear-cut leader, decisive leader who will be able to impose political decisions on the majority Sunnis and the Alawites and Christians and various minorities who live in fear virtually now because of the continuous attacks and destruction which have brought havoc on the country.
Right. So in order to help our viewers understand a bit better and to summarize what we've talked about in a bit, if you can point out, at least 2 or 3 positives and 2 or 3 negative points that will still linger on even after this so-called big peace initiative that has begun. We're sure it's not ending anytime soon, but at least it's begun. That's for good. Positives and negatives.
The positives are that the opposition has realized that it cannot militarily win the situation by dislodging Bashar al-Assad. And this realization is very important in the context of stability. Number 2 is the openness of both the parties for humanitarian aid, both food, medicine, and so on and so forth, which people desperately need, who are refugees, who are displaced people, who are seriously and critically injured. Number 3 is the realization that both these parties cannot impose their will. And that the outside powers, that is Russia and America, would come up with a proposal which will be imposed at a later stage, whether it is ceasefire on an all Syria basis or peacekeeping forces, which are essential to bring or separate the warring factions who have been killing each other for almost 3 years.
But one thing's good, that at least the talks have started. There is hope now for Syrians. In the words of Lakhdar Brahimi, he said that we never expected it to be easy, and it's not easy, certainly. Thank you so much, Dr. Pasha,
well,
for joining me.
Lakhdar Brahimi is being called as prophet of peace. Let's see how he will deliver.
Thank you so much for joining me on this show. With that, we're taking a very short break. Lots more in store up ahead. A look at what's been in spotlight at this year's World Economic Forum in Davos. I'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit means stronger ties between New Delhi and Tokyo. As the chief guest at India's Republic Day celebrations, Abe's visit is a landmark event in the evolution of bilateral ties between the two nations. More importantly, this is the 3rd high-level visit from the Japanese side in a short span of 2 months. Here's more. With economics as the bedrock of a growing partnership, India and Japan are ready to move to the next level. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe met with Manmohan Singh to seal significant defense and trade deals during their bilateral annual summit.
Japan is at the heart of India's Look East policy. It is also a key partner in our economic development and in our quest for a peaceful, stable and prosperous Asia and the world.
また今回のインド訪問には米倉経団連会長をはじめ経済ミッションそして科学技術ミッションも同行しております。これを契機として民間企業間および学術関係者間の協力が一層広がることを期待します。
Abe's visit underlines growing business and political ties between the two nations as they close ranks against mutual rival China, with the initial focus on the sale of amphibious search and rescue aircraft to India.
India is special to Japan because as tensions become more between China and Japan, and it doesn't seem to be in a position that it is going to get erased very fast, then looking at business point of view, India would become the next destination. And this is why probably Japan is trying to make strong bonding at the political level by these activities of visits.
Tokyo will provide yen loans totaling about 210 billion yen for construction of subway lines and energy conservation projects. Japan and India will continue efforts to finalize an agreement on civilian nuclear energy that would open up the Indian market to Japanese players. The World Economic Forum started its annual meeting at the Swiss ski resort of Davos under the theme Reshaping of World. The four-day meeting brought together over 2,500 participants from almost 100 countries, including more than 1,500 business leaders and over 40 heads of state of government. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani took center stage as he sought to drum up investment for his sanction-hit economy amid thawing relations with the West. In addition, the bloody civil war in Syria featured heavily in discussions, with peace talks between Damascus and opposition taking place in the nearby Swiss town of Montreux.
It is destination Davos for the world's global elite once again. The big question this year is how to reshape the world.
Time to look at the real fundamental changes which are happening in the world. It's a technology area, it's a societal field and so on, and to pay much more attention to those challenges which we have to face.
One of the days at the summit saw outlook for global growth at the top of the agenda. In the corridors, the conference mood seemed more bullish this year, but with reservations.
Well, I think there are a couple of things going. One is, in fact, the slowdown in the emerging world. But the second is that the developed world, they've sort of taken their bitter medicine and they're beginning to recover. So the US is recovering, Germany's recovering, UK is recovering. And so the worst is behind us as in terms of the developed world, the advanced economy. So it's a timing issue.
Helping on the income inequality front is create more jobs.
India was represented by Finance Minister P. Chidambaram, Commerce Minister Anand Sharma, Planning Commission Deputy Chairman Montek Singh Ahluwalia and Urban Development and Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kamal Nath. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe used his moment in the spotlight to sound an alarm over what he sees as China's rising militancy and Japan's outdated defense posture.
The dividend of growth in Asia must not be wasted on military expansion. We must use it to invest in innovation and human capital.
The focus of the summit, attended by 40 world leaders, shifted to the powder keg of the Middle East. Iran's Rouhani led a delegation that included Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif and Oil Minister, as Iran bid to come out of the diplomatic cold.
با اجرای توافق ژنو در هفته جاری و قدم‌های بعدی روابط ایران با حوزه اروپا کاملاً به حالت عادی باز خواهد گشت. تعاملات ایران و آمریکا نیز در ماه‌های گذشته وارد مرحله جدیدی شده است.
On the situation in Syria, the heads of 7 of the world's biggest humanitarian and human rights organizations took the unusual step of calling together for humanitarian aid on the sidelines of the summit. At more than 250 sessions and workshops during the forum, participants engaged opinions on fundamental issues such as natural growth, global financial outlook, new energy, ocean economies, health and climate change.
And protesters vying to overthrow Thailand's government stayed on the streets despite the start of a state of emergency in the capital that was imposed to cope with the nation's increasingly violent political crisis. Adding more pressure on Yingluck Shinawatra, Thailand's constitutional court opened the way on Friday to delay a general election the government had set for 2nd February, a ruling that could further drag out the country's political deadlock already in its 3rd month. In a fresh sign that the political power struggle playing out on the streets of Bangkok could go on for some time yet, hundreds of anti-government protesters joined leader Satay Pakshaban on a march through the capital defying the state of emergency. Continuing their campaign to force the resignation of Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra.
ที่จะประกาศสถานการณ์ฉุกเฉินต้องมีสถานการณ์ที่เป็นเหตุฉุกเฉินขึ้นมาก่อนเช่นผู้ชุมนุมก่อเหตุร้ายแต่นี่ไม่มีสถานการณ์ฉุกเฉินเพราะผู้ชุมนุมมาชุมนุมด้วยความสงบปราศจากอาวุธชุมนุมมาจะครบ3 เดือนอยู่แล้วเราไม่เคยก่อเหตุร้ายแรงอะไรเลยเพราะเราสู้โดยสันติ
The government declared a 60-day state of emergency from January 22nd, hoping to prevent an escalation in protests now in their third month.
เราก็ไม่อยากที่จะบอกว่าออกพรก.เพื่อที่จะท้าทายอะไรเลยนะคะก็อันนี้เป็นเครื่องมือของเจ้าหน้าที่ในการที่จะดำเนินงานนะคะแล้วก็เราก็ยืนยันว่าเรายังไม่อยากเห็นภาพในเหตุการณ์เหมือนปี53อยู่แล้วก็ต้องเลยได้ย้ำเจ้าหน้าที่ให้ทุกคนมีความระมัดระวังอย่าใช้สิ่งที่เกินความจำเป็น
Meanwhile, in what could be a blow to the young Lakshanawatra government, Thailand's constitutional court ruled on Friday that a February 2nd election opposed by anti-government protesters can legally be delayed. In a unanimous ruling, the court said the power to delay the ballot rests mutually with Yingluck and the head of the Election Commission.
สิ่งที่จะได้ก็คือยังไงคุณก็มีรัฐบาลซึ่งไม่มั่นคงเท่าไหร่และคำถามคือคนชอบคิดว่ารัฐบาลไม่มั่นคงเป็นปัญหาผมกลับคิดว่ารัฐบาลไม่มั่นคงอาจจะเป็นโอกาสที่จะทำให้ข้อเรียกร้องต่างๆเนี่ยต้องบีบให้เขาทำให้ได้แล้วก็จะมีอายุไม่ยืน
Imposing emergency rule casts yet more doubt over the poll, yet the government, which is now acting in a caretaker capacity, insists there's no legal alternative. The government says that as the Thai parliament has already been dissolved, only a new parliament can choose the next administration. And much else has been unfolding around the world. Here's a quick wrap of other international news of the week.
China's working group to lead the country's overall reform effort held its first meeting on Wednesday, approving the working rules of the group as well as the working rules and members of 6 subgroups. Xi Jinping, Chinese president and leader of the group, presided over the meeting, which was also attended by deputy group leaders Li Keqiang, Liu Yunshan and Zhang Guoli, all members of the Central Politburo Standing Committee of the Communist Party of China. Spain's unemployment remained above 25% for a 6th straight quarter, underpinning the extent of the damage wrought by a 6-year slump in the Euro region's 4th largest economy. Joblessness for the October-December period rose to 26.03% from 25.98% in the previous quarter, and the number of unemployed stood at 5.9 million people. Former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi is to be investigated for alleged witness tampering in an underage prostitution trial. He and his lawyers are accused of meeting the female witness to discuss the evidence they would give. Berlusconi was convicted last year of paying for sex with an underage prostitute known as Ruby the Heart Stealer. 3 protesters were killed and hundreds injured in violent clashes with riot police and special forces units in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. The clashes between police, special forces and rioters spiraled into chaos on Wednesday, the 3rd day of confrontations, as the police stormed barricades and fired stun grenades and rubber bullets in an attempt to push the protesters back. Thousands of rioters responded by burning tires and hurling petrol bombs and chunks of pavement at the police forces. Hundreds of protesters opposed to the current military-backed regime took to the streets in downtown Cairo on 22nd January, echoing demands reminiscent of Egypt's 2011 revolution. The protest comes days before the anniversary of the uprising, which put an end to former President Hosni Mubarak's 30-year rule. The interim government is pushing ahead with a political transition plan that should lead to presidential and parliamentary elections this year, with Sisi seen as a likely candidate. A bomb exploded near a police van in Pakistan's northwestern town of Charsada, killing at least 6 policemen and a child on 22nd January. The blast occurred at Saint Dheri area of Charsada, some 30 kilometers north of Peshawar. 7 other people, including 4 policemen, were wounded in the blast. At least 21 people have been killed and 29 injured in a bus crash in Turkey's central Anatolian city of Kayseri. The report said the driver had lost control of the vehicle while driving on a snow-covered highway. The bus tipped onto its side and swerved in the opposite lane before tumbling off the road. An investigation was underway to determine the cause of the accident.
Shifting gears, time to bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed through this week. Here's all the sports action.
Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff gave assurances that Brazil's troubled Curitiba Stadium will be ready on time for the World Cup as she travelled to northeastern coastal city of Natal to inaugurate its venue for the FIFA tournament. FIFA Secretary General Jigom Walk joined Rousseff for the official inauguration of the 42,000-seat Arena das Dunas. Natal's inauguration comes just days after FIFA officials warned Brazil that it had until February 18 to prove they can get the Curitiba Stadium ready or risk its exclusion from the 32 National Global Sports event. The president of the Olympics International Organizing Committee, Thomas Bach, said that he was very confident that Russia would successfully host a safe Winter Games in Sochi beginning next month. Bach's comments came in the wake of last month's tragedy when 2 suicide bombings killed at least 34 people in the Russian city of Volgograd. Caterham owner Tony Fernandes warned he could walk away from Formula One unless his tail-end team showed significant improvement this season. The Malaysian entrepreneur told reporters at the Caterham factory that there would be no point carrying on if the team remained uncompetitive. The Malaysian-owned team have yet to score a point in 4 years. Fernandes will have 2 new drivers this year in Japan's Kamui Kobayashi and Sweden's Marcus Ericsson. The 2 replace Frenchman Charles Leclerc and Dutch driver Giro van der Garde. Manchester United's $61.4 million bid for playmaker Juan Mata has been accepted by Premier League's rival Chelsea. A newspaper report said Mata had agreed personal terms with the English champions. The Spain international has been linked with a move away from Stamford Bridge after struggling to cement a regular starting spot under manager Jose Mourinho. The fee would break United's transfer record paid for striker Dimitar Berbatov, who joined in 2008 from Tottenham Hotspur for £30.75 million.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. See you next week, same time, with more international news. Till then, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. As I sign off, take a look at some fun moments from the Russian circus acts as they bag top honours at the 38th International Circus Festival of Monte Carlo in Monaco. Enjoy. I'll be back soon.